That's interesting. So, what evil as applied to us it's not evil when God does it.
The fact that we cannot understand God means that we cannot understand.
Right. What God's
his reasoning.
Yeah.
And therefore we cannot apply our morality.
So there might be some mysterious reason for it. It's just necessarily beyond our ken, our comprehension. Yeah. Okay, that's a possibility. Yes.
We have no scale to measure evil on. So I remember Bridget was saying there's a lot of evil in the world. Expected. We don't know how much evil there could be.
I should write this down. It's good.
We don't have a rule though whereby we can measure evil on. So this could be actually a relatively small amount of evil compared to the enormous possibilities of evil that could exist.
Right. Okay. Hard to measure. You certainly can't put pain on a scale, can you? In the way that you can put, say, prunes. You know, it's hard to measure in that kind of simple, mathematically quantifiable way by means of kind of an objective measure. Yeah, that's certainly true. Any other suggestions as to how we might? Yeah.
It's not mine. It's Swinburne's. It's
Okay.
to say that, well, then this is countered by an eternal goodness. So a very short
good.
life of pain and suffering is countered by, an eternal good.
Yeah.
That's his response.
Yeah, you could say there's pain now, but later on it's going to be so fabulous that this will pale into insignificance, whatever we've been put through on this planet. I don't know why he was torturing all the animals for hundreds of millions of years. I don't know if they're going to get compensated in an afterlife, but maybe so. I don't know. Maybe the dinosaurs are going to be there as well. I don't know. Any other suggestions? Yes.
And that's sort of crass, but I mean, we could argue that suffering isn't the same as evil.
You could say that it's not the same as evil, but we defined it as that at the beginning. We said, well, by evil we're going to mean these two things, moral evils and also pain and suffering. And presumably, a caring, benevolent God is not going to unleash pointless suffering. I mean, he might unleash suffering, but it won't be for no reason. It's not going to be gratuitous. So, presumably, I mean, almost everyone agrees, even on the theist side, that gratuitous, pointless suffering is not the kind of thing that a God is going to go in for. And on the face of it, there's just an enormous amount of it. So, there's some serious explaining needs to be done to accommodate it. Yep.
You could say suffering is a test from God, and a good example of that is like the story of Job in the Bible.
Yes, you could say that. Yes, he's putting us through it in order to test our faith or something like that. Job, it was a bet with Satan actually, wasn't it, that particular example?
I think Voltaire gave the best answer to that sort of theodicy though, didn't he, in Candide?
Which was?
Completely lampooning the Irenaean theodicy that was given all these trials like Job.
Yes.
For God's own kind of idea of amusement. To
It's,
test the faith of his believers, and we're proven majestic in our faith through overcoming all these.
Yeah, so okay. Let's not criticise it. No, I agree, I just was interested with you. So, yeah, that's another one we should put on the list. Good. And let's take one more. Lady at the back there.
Well, it's a common human presumption that we are more superior than anything else, but it could be that God has appointed nature the same free will that He's appointed humans.
Right.
Or the way we treat the earth cannot be the way the earth treats us. Therefore, the suffering caused by natural disasters are the result of nature's free will, and the other suffering caused by man is the result of our free will, not the result of God.
Yeah, that's a pretty unorthodox view there, that nature has free will. But, a variant of that would be to say, well, we do things to the world, which are bad things that we shouldn't do, and of course it turns around and bites us. So, for example, we mess about with, genetic engineering, or we fail to immunise people, or there are things that we do. We produce, pollution, and that creates diseases and natural disasters and so on. And so we are ultimately to blame. It is our fault. It's a result of our acting freely. You could take that kind of line. Not quite the same as the move you've just made, which is to attribute free will to nature herself, but you could. It's similar. Yes,
Suffering offers possibility of a higher good of showing compassion and responding and helping people who suffer.
Yes,
And
good.
another one about the Pakistani earthquake. God has created a real world, not a toy world, so you give
Yes,
us the
yeah.
moral responsibility to try and anticipate
Yes,
problems of nature
Yes.
and to help in advance.
Richard Swinburne says that, doesn't he?
Independently and autonomously.
Yeah. Yeah, good. Okay, well, look, you give me quite a few. What I'm going to do for your amusement, when I can figure out how this works, hold on. It's gone again. Let's go through some of them very briefly. We could run, no one mentioned this second time round, but you can still run a free will type theodicy or explanation for a lot of the bad stuff. You can say God gave us free will, He could have made us puppet beings that always did the right thing. But, you know, if you're a puppet being, you're not morally responsible for what you do. And if you're not morally responsible for what you do, the world will not contain moral goodness, which is the most important kind of goodness. So God must cut the strings to allow for moral goodness in the universe. As a result of Him cutting the strings, we inevitably do bad things to each other. That's the price He has to pay for this greater kind of goodness. So there's that kind of explanation. There's a kind of character building explanation which you can offer. Bad experiences can make us stronger, make us more noble. We can be enriched by them, we can learn from them. So, for example, people that have suffered a terrible disease will sometimes say they've gained greatly from it. So similarly, by causing us pain and suffering, God allows us to grow and develop morally and spiritually. No pain, no gain, if you like, theodicy, John Hick type theodicy. You could say, I didn't include this one, but you could say there are certain virtues, such as compassion, which is the gentleman at the back mentioned, that we can't show if there are needy people towards whom we can be compassionate. So in order for us to have the opportunity to exhibit these virtues, acquire them even, there needs to be a certain amount of, neediness in the universe, and similarly some pain and suffering and so on for us to anticipate. And then if you don't like any of these explanations, or you find them jointly inadequate as they stand, you could always play the mystery card. You can say, as one of you did, who are you to think you know the mind of God? This is inevitably going to be, what He has in mind is inevitably going to be largely shrouded in mystery. We are not going to be able to understand everything. So the mere fact that there is evil that we can't understand is no good evidence that there is no such God. You would expect there to be things that we can't understand. So there are these kind of explanations and many other explanations too. You've provided some additional ones here, which I'll try and remember to come back to. And so you might think as a theist that even if we haven't entirely dealt with the evidential problem of evil, we have at least begun to bring it down in size so that it becomes more manageable. It is not the overwhelming, disaster for theism that it might have appeared to be at the beginning once we start making these kinds of moves. That the theist has got room to breathe again. It begins to look as if, well, maybe it's not quite so downright ridiculous as it first appeared once we start making these kinds of moves. We can lift it off the bottom of the scale of reasonableness. It can start to rise up again. Even if it can't rise that high. It's not like believing in fairies. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to question that. It seems to me that these theodicies are hopeless, frankly, as an atheist. I suppose you might expect me to say that. But I'll try and convey to you why I find them hopeless. And the way I'm going to do it is I want you to consider a different God hypothesis. There's no good God, there's just a single God, all-powerful and all evil, supremely malevolent. His wickedness knows no bounds, his moral depravity is off the scale, limitless. So he created the universe, he's responsible for everything in it. Who believes in a God like that? How high on the scale of reasonableness does this God hypothesis sit? What do you think? Anyone want to stick him halfway up the scale of reasonableness? Maybe one person. Is that a question or?
Didn't they have one in, ancient Babylon, Zoroaster or something? They had Guru Mazda, who was...
there have been evil gods, certainly, and then there's a kind of Manichaean
Yeah.
belief system where you have a good god and an evil god and in conflict. But this is different because this is just the one god, all powerful and all evil. So it's kind of monotheism, but the evil version. Yeah, just so we're clear what it... And it's not Satan, then, because it's a god, you know, with limitless power. Satan he's a nothing compared to the all-powerful God. So, consider that belief. Now, I think almost everyone would say, well, that, you know, pull the other one. Frankly, this is ridiculous. Why is it ridiculous? Well, there are many reasons why it's ridiculous, but simply on the basis of empirical observation, surely we can rule this particular God out. You might think. You might say, well, let me pretend, right? Let me pretend that I believe in this God, to make the best case that I can for it. Notice that cosmological arguments, fine-tuning type arguments, arguments from design, teleological arguments, many of the standard arguments for the existence of God are, as I pointed out right at the beginning, neutral on God's moral properties. So if they support belief in a good God, they support belief in an evil God just as much, actually. It's just as much of a leap to the conclusion that a good God exists as it is to the conclusion that an evil God exists. So if it's reasonable to draw the conclusion a good God exists on the basis of those kind of arguments, then why not an evil God? Or as they stand, those arguments fail to support one hypothesis over the other. So I can help myself to those arguments as a kind of reverse theist. Even then, though, I'm sure the vast majority of you will not be persuaded, and one of the most obvious reasons you won't be persuaded is that there is the evidential problem of good to deal with. If you believe in a good God, you face the evidential problem of evil. If you believe in an evil God, you face the evidential problem of good. Look around you. This universe is too nice. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of evil in it. We've established that. But there's an awful lot of good, remarkable quantities of good. Too much good for this plausibly to be the creation of an evil God. An evil God might allow some good for his evil purposes, but there's just way, way too much good stuff. It's the mirror problem then to the evidential problem of evil. So, here are some examples. Why would an evil God create beautiful sunsets and mountains for us to enjoy? He wouldn't do that because it gives us joy, pleasure. He will not go in for that sort of thing at all. He'll torture us for all eternity with a red-hot poker, not give us a lovely sunset. Why would he give us healthy young bodies to frolic around in the sunshine and have fun? No, he would give us painful, arthritic, decrepit bodies, surely, not healthy young bodies. Why would he give us children to love? Evil God hates love. That would make him vomit, probably, love. So he's not going to populate the universe with little bundles of joy that we love unconditionally and love us unconditionally in return. This is exactly the sort of thing that he's going to stamp out straight away. Why would he allow us to help each other? Mother Teresa to go around relieving the suffering of the people in India. Although apparently she didn't, according to Christopher Hitchens, but let's suppose that she did. Then an evil God won't allow that. He'll clamp down on that kind of behaviour straight away. Why would he bestow on some people, I don't know, David Beckham, for example, fantastic good fortune and wealth? Surely if God was all evil, he would torture David Beckham with a red-hot poker for all eternity. But no, he gives him another multi-million-dollar contract for kicking a ball around on a piece of grass. Again, that's just not the behaviour of an evil, supremely evil being. So it seems that belief in an all-evil God is pretty absurd, which is why we ought to place belief in an evil God very low on the scale of reasonableness, right? I mean, that's where we want to put him. We're all agreed about that, I take it. The evidence against an all-evil God is surely overwhelming, but what if we try these kinds of explanation? Why would an evil God allow Mother Teresa to go around reducing suffering? Well, he could have made us puppet beings that always did the evil thing. But if he had done that, the universe would not contain moral evil, which is the worst kind of evil that there is. So he had to cut the strings. So he cuts the strings, and Mother Teresa chooses to do good, which is precisely what evil God doesn't approve of. But it's the price he has to pay for moral evil existing in the universe. You can see what I've done there, I suspect, right? I've taken a standard Christian theodicy and I've just flipped it round and used it in defence of belief in an evil God. Also, because we have free will, there are forms of psychological suffering we can experience that we could not otherwise experience. For example, temptation. We all know what that's like, the temptation to do something that perhaps you really shouldn't do. It can be really very unpleasant. It's an interesting psychological form of suffering which is not available to an evil God. He can't inflict it on people unless they believe they have a free choice. So there are, you could have tortured us for all eternity with the red hot poker, but that would have got pretty boring pretty quickly. He's going to want to introduce these introducing psychological forms of suffering, which he cannot do unless he gives us free will, or at least the illusion of it, which is probably all we've got anyway. Similarly, guilt. You can't feel guilty about something if you don't believe yourself to have had a free choice about whether or not to do it. So he will certainly, in order to introduce these interesting, deep forms of suffering, he will at least create the illusion of free will, even if not the reality of it. If you don't like that, well, then we could say that this is not a veil of soul creation, in the way that John Hick suggests. This is a veil of soul destruction. Why would an evil God create natural beauty? Well, as a contrast, obviously, so that we would appreciate the ugliness and dreariness of day-to-day life all the more. So it's a bit of flowery language here. To truly appreciate the ghastliness of the environment most of us inhabit, we need to be reminded every now and then that things could have been different. God put some natural beauty into the world to make our appreciation of the ugliness and dreariness of day-to-day life all the more acute. Why would he give us beautiful children to love? Well, it's only if you love someone unconditionally that you can truly be made to suffer when he kills them in front of you. You won't suffer nearly as much if you don't care that much. So you've got love is absolutely a key tool so far as evil God is concerned. He is definitely going to want love in his universe, because without love, the most dreadful forms of pain cannot be inflicted. Why does he give you a healthy and fit young body? Well, for 10 or 15 years, and then slowly and inexorably he takes it away. So that you, what do I say here, slide into decay, disease and decrepitude until you end up hopelessly ugly, incontinent and smelling of wee, and then you die having lived out a short and ultimately meaningless existence. The awfulness of it is made so much more awful because you once had something wonderful that was then taken away from you in such a way that you had no control over that. And of course, in the meantime, you could always be struck down with cancer or run over by a bus. So the anxiety is with you all the time, in any case. So by giving us something and then snatching it away, evil God can make us suffer even more than if we never had it in the first place. Why does David Beckham get a new Ferrari? Well, God bestows on a few people lavish lifestyles, health, wealth and success to increase the suffering of everyone else. I mean, who can rest content when they have so much, when you know that no matter how hard you work, you will never have it, when you know that they don't deserve it. And it's a win-win situation for evil God, because deep down, even David Beckham isn't really happy. So, it's